My name is Elaine Adler. I'm co-president of the Highland Park Highwood League along with Barbara Cronish and Barb LePay. And I'm representing the leagues of the 10th District that that are sponsoring this forum right now. The leagues of Deerfield, Glencoe, Glenview, Highland Park, Highwood, and Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. You know, most of you, I think, that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots organization in that we neither endorse nor impose any kind of candidate. We do support issues after we have done a league study and have presented the information to our membership. And if our membership comes to consensus, then we particularly support the issue. Otherwise, we do not support individual candidates. The League of Women Voters, for almost 90 years, has encouraged citizen participation, and we're still doing it. We believe that the one of the most important tenets in the U.S. is the right to vote and also the right to be informed. And so you probably know that we have various symposiums, various forums asking you to come and join us and understand the various issues. And the Candidates Forum is one like that. We are your neighbors, and we do hope that you will join us either actively or inactively. You can find information about us outside, and you can find us on Facebook, and you can find us in the League organization. Because we are nonpartisan, our moderators are League moderators, but they are from different leagues. And we have today, fortunately, Sue Calder from the Evanston League, right, who is going to be our moderator today. Sue has moderated before us before. She's very, very experienced and very active in the Evanston League. So I'm going to turn this over to Sue, who is going to tell you again about the candidates' forums. The candidates here have signed off to rules of the road, so there are certain guidelines that we know they're going to respect today. Your bio. And will you join me, please, in welcoming Sue Calder? Thank you. Okay.
Well, I'd like to welcome you again. Can you hear me? No. No. Now. Okay. So it's great to see such a great turnout on this lovely February day. It's amazing that it's 57 degrees out. And we're going to start with a forum for the 10th Congressional District Democratic primary. And then we'll take a short break and then go on to the state's attorney's race. Earlier, the candidates agreed to certain rules for the debate, and they drew order for opening statements, and Ms. Rottering will go first for her opening statement. All responses, the opening statements, the responses to questions, and the closing statements are all 1.5 minutes long. We have timers sitting in the front row, and they'll tell the candidates when they have 30 seconds left to go, when they have 15 seconds left to go, and when it's time to stop. And I told them that I allow them to finish a sentence, but we wouldn't ramble on. Questions from the audience should be given to the ushers, and they have extra index cards. So if you want a question, submit a question, please raise your hand and they'll get one to you. The league members will review the questions and basically for duplication and for appropriateness. For instance, a question on garbage collection is not appropriate for this candidates forum, nor is one on a school referendum. There will be no visual aids used by the candidates during the forum. And in order to preserve the nonpartisanship of the league, I ask that there be no campaign buttons or t-shirts in this room. Fine outside, but not in here. We also ask you to turn off all your cell phones for the forum. The forum is being taped, and so there's no need for taping or taking any other pictures during the forum. Candidates have agreed that no voice or image other than that provided by the League may be used. So with that, I think we'll begin. And Ms. Rodering, you have an opening statement of 1.5 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. As a proud member of the League, I appreciate the importance of having these forums and the chance for you to hear us talk about our agreement and our disagreements on the issues. I need to give a shout out to the class of 1979 from Highland Park High School. There are a number of members here who are showing our advocacy, our roots, and taking action when we see an opportunity. And so I want to thank my classmates for being here and for many other supporters for joining us today. So I did grow up in Highland Park. I graduated from the high school. I went to Stanford, where I majored in economics, and then got my MBA from Northwestern. That's where I met my husband. And then I went on to the University of Chicago, where I received my law degree. I practiced healthcare law with McDermott, Will, and Emery, and then around the time the fourth child arrived, stepped off the corporate ladder to raise my family and to be a strong participant in our community. And so to that end, I ran for city council in 2009. Many of you were in the room. And then again in 2011, I ran for mayor, and I'm proud to now be in my second term as mayor. We've balanced budgets. We've maintained our AAA bond rating. We took on ComEd when they were failing us, and we also passed an assault weapons ban in the face of large opposition from NRA members in their city chambers. So I'm here to fight for all of us, to make sure that the values we hold most dear are upheld, and to be your next congressman from the 10th District. I'm Nancy Rodering. I'm running for Congress, and I hope I can count on your vote starting early tomorrow or on March 15th, Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I didn't put in my opening guidelines was if you would refrain from clapping. That just takes away time, and we really, with 1.5 response times, we don't have a lot of time for questions. So I think you'd rather hear more from the candidates than each other clapping. Mr. Schneider.
Thank you. I'll do a shout out to the class of 1979 from Cherry Creek High School in Denver. Anybody? It is an honor to be here. Thank you for having this forum. I am Brad Schneider. I am running to go back to Congress, and I am asking for your vote beginning tomorrow through March 15th. I remember back now 3 years ago when I first got to Congress. It was in the aftermath of the Newtown shooting, and I was deciding what would be my first speech from the floor of the House. My colleagues told me you don't take on the most powerful lobby in the entire country by speaking about guns. But I chose to take them on, to go to the floor of the House and call for a ban on assault weapons, to call for a closing of the gun show loophole and universal background checks, to call for taking action as a country to reduce the scourge of violence that's affecting us. In Chicago alone this year, over 100 people have died. I went on after that speech to sponsor legislation, the most broad, comprehensive gun violence reduction legislation we've ever seen, and we were making progress. Until May of 2013, when I cried with the families of Newtown, with the parents of Hadia Pendleton, because the outside influence of the NRA allowed them to block a vote in the United States Senate. But I also swore that day that I wasn't going to give up that fight, that we would fight until we could pass legislation that would end gun violence in our country, or at least reduce it. That I'd fight to make sure we have an economy growing from the middle out, that we have an education system that gives every child a chance, regardless of where they live, the opportunity for a quality education, to go to college without the burden of extraordinary debt, to get a quality, well-paying job, and to have a long and secure retirement.
Thank you.
That's what I'm working for. Thank you.
So our first question really follows up on opening statements. And Mr. Schneider, you will go first. It asks, what distinguishes you from your opponent?
Thank you, and to save time, I'll speak from the table. I think if you look at the Daily Herald endorsement that I received, and they talked about a couple of key issues: mastery of issues, mastery of understanding of what we face, experience, having been there, knowing that when we have a new president come in office next January, I can hit the ground running. I know what I want to work on: growing the economy, helping small businesses, leading in the world, ensuring our place as a leader in a very dangerous, complex world. Temperament. My relationship with my colleagues. There's a reason that so many of my colleagues from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, the leadership of the national Democrats in the House, as well as 7 state reps, 8 mayors, and village presidents. The people who I've worked with here are supporting me because they know the work I did here. And finally, perspective. Julie was reminding me, my wife Julie's here, was reminding me as we came over here, how my colleagues would tell her what they appreciated about the work I did was the thoughtfulness that I brought to it. I will always look at every issue, understand every issue down to its core principles and assumptions. I will always evaluate every issue. How do we make decisions that benefit our communities? Because if we have stronger communities, we have a stronger state and a better nation. I think the reason the Daily Herald endorsed me because they understand the difference I can make in Washington beginning on day one. And they understand that I can win this race. I'm the only Democrat who's ever won representing this part of Lake County, and I will do it again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roddering.
Thank you. So as the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times endorsed me, they stated frankly, my ability to get things done, my courageous leadership, my passion in moving forward on issues that really matter to us, whether it's gun violence reduction, whether it's health care. My background has been in healthcare management and law for over 30 years, and we know how important the Affordable Care Act is and access to healthcare can be. But more to the point, many people in this community are supporting me, and we have support from local leaders, not people in Washington, people here on the ground, such as Senator Dick Durbin, Barbara Flynn Curry, Ab Mikva, Adlai Stevenson, because they recognize in me not only an ability to get things done, but a strong background in business and in law, a willingness to work across both sides of the aisle and work to move forward on the things that are important to the members of the 10th District, and more importantly, that I'm able to beat Bob Dole and hold this seat in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes first to you, Ms. Roddering, and I'd like it to say that how would you like to see immigration laws changed, and specifically, how would you like to handle the illegal immigrants of U.S. citizens?
Thank you. And I have to say it's Rotering, like motoring. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So we are a nation built on immigrants. We have gained so much from the various cultures and the various skill sets and the important differences that our immigrants bring to this country. And I know we're all thinking right now of our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and what they brought to our wonderful nation. We also know that locally immigration is an issue, and we have a number of families in Highland Park and in Highwood who aren't documented right now. And so to me, it's very important that we pass comprehensive immigration reform, but in the meantime, take the steps that we can to help people feel comfortable living out of the shadows, to pass laws like DACA and DAPA and let them go through and let people feel that they can go to school and not come home fearing that their parents aren't going to be there when they get home. One of the things that I did locally as a mayor, many of you know this, we have some volunteers here today. We created a legal aid clinic, and one of the 3 main points of that legal aid clinic are to provide help to these members of our community, our neighbors, our friends, students who go to school with our children on their path to citizenship. We know that comprehensive immigration reform is critical to helping these 11 million people become part of the country and to move forward. It doesn't make sense to say we're going to send them away. They are a vibrant and important part of our economy and our communities, and it behooves us to move forward and help them on their path to citizenship.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
Thank you. This is a crucial issue, and I've been saying for a very long time, if I had a magic wand, if I could pick, or magic wish, and I could pick one piece of legislation to pass tomorrow, it would be comprehensive immigration reform, because it is so important. On the economic side, it's estimated that comprehensive immigration reform would add $2 trillion to our economy over the next decades, would reduce our debt by $170 billion. All of that is resources that will allow us to tackle many of the other challenges we face in our community, including funding of our schools. We have 11 million people living in the shadows today. Passing comprehensive immigration reform would pull them out of the shadows, allow them to be fully participative members of our communities, starting businesses, buying homes, giving their kids the education they deserve, and again, helping to make our communities stronger. So the first thing I would do is pass comprehensive immigration reform. I would do that with a couple of specific critical components. It has to have a pathway for citizenship for these 11 million people. We cannot have two classes of citizens in this country. It's not how we were created, and it's not how we move forward. It has to address the dreamers, DAPA and DACA, the idea of letting people who came here as young people go to school, get the education they deserve to pursue their dreams, achieve their passions, and help be a part of our community, move our country forward. We also have to make sure that we protect our borders, but do it in a way that reflects our values, not militarizing our borders or, as someone said, build a wall and let them pay for it, but knows when people come in, knows why they're here, where they're here, and when they've overstayed their welcome, and helps them find a proper way to get home.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider, this next question goes to you. What is your plan to deal with issues created by the Affordable Care Act, including limited choices on the health care exchange?
So I think one of the best moments, certainly one of the best moments of the Obama presidency, was the passage of the Affordable Care Act. If you remember what Joe Biden said, which I will not repeat here, but he said it was a big deal. It was a big deal and still is a big deal. Today, there are 18 million people who have insurance who didn't have insurance in 2010. Today, someone who has a pre-existing condition can get insurance that they couldn't have gotten in 2010. And today, any of us who might get sick will not receive a rescission letter from the insurance company saying, I'm sorry, your insurance didn't cover that illness. All of that because of one of the most important acts we passed in the country, the Affordable Care Act. Right? I am proud to have defended and fought for the Affordable Care Act. I am proud of the fact that the Republicans chose to spend more money against me in the last election, criticizing me for my defense of the Affordable Care Act. And one of the reasons Nancy Pelosi is supporting me is she knows I am a champion of a bill that she worked harder than anyone other than President Obama to get through the Congress. But it's also not a perfect law. First of all, in the last 6 years, technology has changed. Our system of delivery for healthcare has changed. Our laws on healthcare, our policy in healthcare are always going to have to be dynamic and variable to match those changes. We have to address the problem of accessibility. We have to make sure that there are more insurance plans on our exchanges so that when people go to the exchange to buy insurance, they can get coverage that they can afford with the doctors they want to visit for the services they need and deserve. I worked very hard in Congress protecting and building upon the Affordable Care Act. I look forward to going back and continuing to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Rotering.
Thank you. For 30 years, I've worked in the healthcare industry, on the policy side, on the provider side, on the payer side, and as an attorney in the healthcare industry. To me, access to care was always the most important thing, because when you have access to healthcare, you can take care of your family, you can go to work, you can go to school, you can participate in your community. It, to me, was one of the greatest things that ever happened in the last 10 years. So I appreciate all of the hard work that went into it. By the same token, there are still challenges. The costs continue to rise, and we need to look at things like better coordination of care, making sure that drug prices are regulated, making sure that there isn't overtreatment, and cracking down on fraud and abuse. One of the things that I worked on as an attorney was reducing fraud and abuse. This is still an area that really is responsible for increasing significant costs within our healthcare system. To that end, we do need to expand the marketplace. We do need to make sure that there are more choices for people, and we need to put the pressure on those remaining red states who are failing to expand Medicaid. This is something that we can do. We can make sure that more people are covered. 18 million is a wonderful, wonderful metric of progress. There are still many people who haven't been able to access care, and one of my priorities in Congress will be making sure that they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rotering, would you share with us your vision of America's role in the world and how you will try to shape Americans' role vis-a-vis China, Russia, the Middle East, and fighting terror? It's a big question. You guys are going to go the full time in this one.
So we have the opportunity as a leader among our global allies to move forward and to show by role, but to show by example what can be achieved. I don't think we can solve all of the issues in China, Russia, the Middle East, and terror in 90 seconds, so I'll do my best. But the bottom line is we know that in the Middle East there is a fragile balance that needs to be protected, that needs to be partnered with the United States. Israel in particular is the only democracy. They are our strongest partner in the Middle East, and it's incumbent upon us to help and make sure that they maintain their qualitative military edge and that we are there absolutely 100% in the fight on terror. In terms of China, looking at things that are happening currently in North Korea and the UN resolution that was introduced last week and the potential for the United States to work as a partner with South Korea on the anti-ballistic missile, the THAAD system, that's something that we need to continue to move forward on so we can continue to maintain that fragile balance in that area. And then in terms of Russia as well, looking forward is also looking back and knowing what happens in history when we aren't strong and when we don't take definitive action in terms of working with our global allies. But this is something that absolutely is incumbent upon us. We can't be the policeman for the world. We need to be partners with those who also have an impact on global policy.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
So I was very proud and honored to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee when I served in Congress. In fact, Elliot Engel, the senior Democrat on that committee, was in town 2 weeks ago speaking on my behalf and saying we need Brad back on that committee. I hope that I have the chance to do that again. The world is a better place. Let's talk about vision to start with. The world is a better place when the United States is engaged. Some would have us pull back. I believe we have to lean in. I believe we have to work with our allies and sometimes work with our adversaries and other times stand up to them. And China is a perfect example of that. We are currently trying to work with China on addressing the problem of this rogue nation, North Korea. Okay? It's not that we're working with putting THAAD missiles into South Korea. We have delivered batteries of THAAD, thermal high-altitude anti-defense system. We've delivered those missiles into South Korea, and we're working with China, Japan, and others introducing sanctions resolutions in the United Nations. Just this past Thursday, that would check all cargo ships coming in, restrict, and separate understand the difference between the leadership of North Korea and the people of North Korea. We also have to sometimes work with Russia, as we did on the Iran's nuclear agreement, but stand up to Russia, as we are doing and need to do a better job of in Ukraine, in the Crimea, and throughout Europe, and now in Syria. Right? The Middle East is a situation, a environment where the United States has been involved for decades. We cannot withdraw from the Middle East. We have to engage, working with our allies, in particular Israel, our most important, most strategic ally, perhaps in the entire world. I look forward to getting back to Congress and being back on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Thank you. Okay, the next question goes to Mr. Schneider first. And how will you work to fill Justice Scalia's seat on the Supreme Court?
Well, as a member of the House of Representatives, as a candidate for the House of Representatives, all we have, both of us have, is a soapbox. But let's talk about the principle. Number one, we elect our president for 4 years, not for 3. This president has not only the responsibility or the prerogative to nominate a Supreme Court justice, he has the responsibility. And we should all be very vocal on whatever media you use, as you talk letters to the editor, that the United States Senate must have a hearing on whomever this president, or for that matter any president, nominates to the Supreme Court. Right? This is crucial, because if it's 1 year that we can wait, after we win the presidency next year, they're going to say, well, we have to wait 4 more years, and will there be more openings? It's wholly unacceptable. But within the House of Representatives, we do have a role. We do have a Judiciary Committee that functions as the Judiciary Committee, in fact, where immigration starts. Right? That committee is important, understanding what's happening in that committee, being engaged in those issues, and calling out for a system in the United States that respects the rights of all citizens, that addresses the challenges we face, whether it's immigration, national security, or technology, privacy, all of these issues. Working with my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, I was proud to be a champion for these issues, and I look forward to doing so again.
Thank you. Ms. Rodering?
The Constitution is very clear. It's the responsibility of the president to propose a nominee to fill the Supreme Court vacancy, and it's the responsibility of the Senate to consider that appointee. To Brad's earlier point, obviously as candidates we don't have much to do about that other than to say, this is our time. We need to speak up. We need to support the president in his constitutional prerogative, and we need to make sure that people recognize that this is a ludicrous proposition by the other side. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Rodering, you get this question next, or first, is what should the government be doing to reduce gun violence?
I'm proud to say that we had the opportunity here in Highland Park to make our small stand to reduce gun violence when we took on the NRA, many of whom filled our council chambers, unfortunately called us Nazis, and said to us, we're going to sue you. The city of Highland Park had that opportunity, and I'm proud to say that we took it, and we voted to ban all assault weapons and to reduce to ban large capacity magazines as well. Within our nation, this is one step, and we had the chance to provide this now model national ordinance, constitutionally tested, to many other cities across the country who requested it the day after the Supreme Court chose to uphold our ordinance. That being said, there are a lot of things that still need to be done and can be done, and when I'm in Congress, I will make sure that they are done, and that is working to pass universal background checks, making sure that there is absolute enforcement against the handful of bad dealers who allow the illegal trafficking of guns into our cities from Mississippi and from Indiana, and also making sure that mental health care services are available and are accessible to the people in our country who need them. This is a public health issue. This is not just a public safety issue, and it's incumbent upon our nation to make this a priority and to work hard and to advocate and to not step back, to show courageous leadership and to be the advocate that we all need and are counting on in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
Thank you. I said in my opening remarks my position on guns, what we have to do. And it has to happen sooner, not later, now, if we can. I commend Mayor Rodering and the city of Highland Park for passing an ordinance banning assault weapons. We need to do a lot more nationally, not just ban assault weapons. We need to close the gun show loophole and the internet loophole so that someone can't go to a gun show. If you have a chance to read Mrs. Klebold, Dylan Klebold's mother wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post this week about how her son, she had no idea he had guns. He was able to go to these shows as a minor and get guns and then go into Columbine High School, which was a rival of Cherry Creek, just drawing those two together. But to go into Columbine High School and kill 12 students and a teacher. Right? We need to make sure that people aren't able to get access to these high-capacity magazines where they can walk into a theater and fire off 70 rounds in less than a minute before first responders can come. And we need to make sure that trafficking of guns across state lines is a federal crime. Those are some of the key things we can do, but we also have to recognize that 2/3 of all people who die today from guns, 90 will die, 60 today, 90 will die, 60 tomorrow, will die from self-inflicted gun wounds. We have to deal with the mental health aspects of gun violence in our country. And we have to work with our communities, giving resources to first responders and to schools, the training and the resources they need to try to make our communities safer. It can't be a piecemeal, step-by-step progress that takes a long time. We need comprehensive action, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Schneider, you get this next question, and it's on campaign finance reform. A few years ago, the Supreme Court ruled on Citizens United, and what would you do to change Citizens United and amend and make other changes to campaign finance reform?
Great question. Citizens United is, I believe, will be regarded by history as one of the worst decisions this Supreme Court or any Supreme Court has ever made. It is distorting our political process and corrupting our government. We have to address it. I was hopeful that the Supreme Court would, in the subsequent years, overrule their initial bad decision. Instead, they've doubled down, for example, on McCutcheon. Then it comes to Congress. But as long as Congress is controlled by the Republicans, nothing's going to happen. So then it comes to the conversation, and I'm putting it on all of us here up on the stage and everyone in this room. We need to start talking about a constitutional amendment. We need to end Citizens United. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the organization, End Citizens United. We need to fix our campaigns. This summer, when there were 17 Republican presidential candidates, each backed by at least one billionaire, there were more presidential candidates backed by billionaires than there were competitive House races in the entire country. Think about that for a second. 435 congressional districts, but because of money, most districts, not this one, but most, are safe and they don't even have races. And yet you have billionaires who can literally buy a presidential candidate as they go in and race for the White House. We have to end Citizens United. We have to do it united as a people. And if we don't do it, our system is going to be further corrupted.
Thank you. Ms. Roeder?
Thank you. Absolutely, Citizens United is corrupting our democratic process. And there was an article in the New York Times a few months ago that talked about how literally a handful of families had contributed half of the money to the presidential campaigns, which is appalling and needs to be changed. So moving towards a constitutional amendment is absolutely necessary. It is impossible for most people to run for office because of the financial demands that they have to meet. I co-taught a class at the University of Chicago, and somebody posed the question, what advice would you give to a single mother of 3 who wants to run for office? And my advice was, unfortunately, good luck, because the amount of time that needs to go into raising funds to run for this office, any office, is ludicrous. And what do we get? We end up getting a disrepresentative government. We get a government of people who have the time, who have the network, who have the ability to move forward, to raise the funds, and we don't get the other 99% of the country even considering running for office. This is a disservice to all of us. It's a disservice to our democracy. It needs to be changed, and we need to move forward with that constitutional amendment.
Thank you. We're going to change a little bit. And Ms. Rodering, you have the first question, answer for this question, is what would you do to promote cleaner air?
Thank you. There are all kinds of steps that we can take to promote cleaner air, and here in Highland Park, I'm proud to say that we've made sustainability an absolute priority. Feel free to go to cityhpil.com and take a look at our over 200-page sustainability guidelines, the master plan that we've put together. We need to look at the promises that came out of the Paris Accord and move forward. The unfortunate side of all of that is that there aren't a lot of regulations, there aren't a lot of requirements, there are a lot of wishes, and so moving forward and developing clean energy, renewable energy, is a critical way to provide for cleaner air. We in the city have moved forward in terms of building out more bike walk plans. Peg Lemley, you're here somewhere, and you've been one of the pioneers working on that to give people the opportunities for alternative means of transit and ability to get around with ways that reduce the use and dependence on fossil fuels. But really, it's got to be putting the resources in, putting the incentives in, putting the right tax incentives in for people to move forward with the development of clean energy and renewable energy and taking down the greenhouse gases that we're all producing.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
So I think one of the greatest responsibilities we in this room have to the next generation is to provide them a healthy, sustainable environment. That includes clean air and clean water. It includes addressing what is not a future threat, but an absolute present danger of global warming. We have to do that. I was proud to sponsor legislation when I was in Congress, protecting our environment, to have an A grade from the Sierra Club. I'm proud. We're going to announce it later this week, but I'll announce it here today. I have the endorsement of the Sierra Club. Very happy to have that because of the work I have done on behalf of the environment. We need to make sure our children have clean air and clean water, not just today, but for the rest of their lives. That means passing legislation and funding the enforcement mechanisms within the EPA to make sure that that's taken care of. We have to. The Paris Accord, the Paris Agreement that was agreed to by 179 countries in December in France is a step in the right direction. But there is no enforcement in that. The United States can and must play a leading role in bringing new technologies, which is, by the way, going to help spur our economy, new technologies to the world to lower greenhouse emissions. But we also have to work in international fora, from the United Nations to others, to make sure that we have the enforcement mechanisms, that other countries are living by the standards and expectations that came out of the Paris Accords. I look forward to getting into Congress and working on those.
Thank you. We're going to stay on the environment again. And what would you do if one of the 10th district communities had a contaminated water situation like Flint, Michigan?
I would pray to God first that we never have the decision making like you saw in Michigan, where the Republican governor and others chose to put lives at risk and chose consciously to put communities of lesser economic means at risk just to save a few pennies. But if a situation like that were to happen, or if there were a flood as there was in 2013 in our communities, I do believe there is a role of the federal government to come and help to fix those situations. Hillary Clinton talks about it takes a village to raise a child. But I think it does take a nation, a strong nation working together, to make sure our communities are strong. The first piece of legislation, when I got to Congress in 2013, the first thing you do is you vote for a Speaker of the House. Then you get sworn in. Then you break for the day. We came back the next day. The very first piece of legislation I got to vote on was relief for the victims of Superstorm Sandy in 2012. And if you remember that storm, the Republicans were holding Congress literally over a barrel, blocking support for these communities in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, all along the Atlantic coast, saying that's not our problem. Well, the fact of the matter is, and I think this is the role of each of us representing our districts, we are a nation united. We do have a responsibility for each other. So if something like what happened in Flint happened here, I would work to bring the resources from Washington to make sure we could address that with great urgency, and I think we should bring those resources to Flint to help the people of Flint as well.
Thank you. Ms. Rotary?
Thank you. This highlights the critical need of elections, and what matters is your vote. When you pick the people to represent you, you're picking the people who are making sure that you have the benefit of health and safety, and they're looking out for your welfare. In Highland Park, I've made infrastructure one of my 3 priorities as mayor, and we've invested significantly in our water distribution system, and I'm pleased to say that we provide water not just for Highland Park, but for 5 other communities. We take that responsibility incredibly seriously, making sure that that water is safe and available and clean every single day. In terms of what we would do, what I would do, absolutely. The federal government serves as that safety net. When that vote came up to fund the immediate answer to dealing with the water systems in Flint and replacing those pipes, that should have happened. I would never have considered anything but voting to support the people of Flint. Now, more to the point, we need to look at our infrastructure across our country, because there are other places, not just Flint, Michigan, that are dealing with dangerous and unhealthy water systems. And so it's incumbent upon us to elect someone who makes infrastructure a priority, who will work with the local communities and the states to give them the resources that they need to ensure that all communities have safe and healthy drinking water.
Thank you. Ms. Rotary, would you describe your position on the recent treaty with Iran?
So when the Iran agreement came under consideration, it was a very, very difficult decision, frankly, because it was between 2 difficult options. Neither one was a good option. So I took the time to read the deal. I called friends in Congress, called friends in the Senate, called friends in Israel, and really debated the merits of either decision. At the end of the day, there were 2 choices. One was this imperfect deal that provided us with the ability to at least control and monitor and diminish Iran's access to developing nuclear weapons, or no deal, which left us with a month to 2 months to a breakout. Looking at the two options, the deal wasn't perfect. No deal really wasn't an option. So to me, it made sense to go forward and to support the Iran deal, with the caveat that this is a deal not with our friends, but with terrorists, people who have made the destruction of Israel one of their missions. So with that, you negotiate with your enemies, you shake hands with your friends. We negotiated this deal. This was critical that the global community came together and showed in a force of strength that they were not going to allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, and that if there was any cheating, there was going to be an immediate and serious response.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
Thank you. So I've been working for the better part of 2 decades trying to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapons capability. In fact, I got involved in around 2000 as soon as we heard that Iran was working towards a nuclear weapon. As a citizen, before I was in Congress, I would go to Washington and work advocating for strong sanctions to slow Iran down from moving forward, trying to bring them to a negotiating table to ultimately have that negotiation and to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Okay. When I was in Congress, I helped introduce and sponsor legislation that put sanctions on Iran, bringing them to the table. And when the President and the Secretary of State announced that Iran was coming for negotiations, I supported those negotiations for one simple reason. The only way to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon by peaceful means is a negotiated agreement. When the deal came out this summer, I did raise concerns. I was concerned that there were gaps in the deal that would make it harder to police and enforce this deal going forward, making sure Iran got no closer to a nuclear weapon, not just for the next 15 years, but for 15 years beyond that, forever. And I was concerned that there were risks in this deal that would further destabilize an already chaotic and dangerous region. The deal has passed. It is in force. Now my position, and I suspect it's the position of virtually everybody in this room, is this JCPOA, the agreement with Iran, it's not a treaty, by the way, it's not even signed. The agreement with Iran has to succeed. My intention is to go back to Congress, to work with my colleagues, to continue to lead, as I did on the Foreign Affairs Committee, to make sure that this agreement with Iran succeeds not just for the next 15 years, but forever in preventing permanently Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider, how and what would you do to hold the VA accountable to ensure that veterans of all ages receive the care that they deserve?
Thank you. This question, I suspect, comes out of the situation a couple years ago where it was discovered that there were incredibly long waiting periods, continued long waiting periods for our veterans to get the care they need and deserve. But even worse, that there were concentrated efforts by some within the VA to cover up or misrepresent those delays. We need to make sure that all of our veterans, everyone who has worn a uniform and served our country, putting their lives on the line, has the resources, the care, and the support they deserve for their lifetime. Now this becomes a much more personal issue for me now. Julie's here, my wife's here with me. Our son is in his second week of Navy Officer Candidate School in Rhode Island. It's been hard, I haven't talked to him for 2 weeks. But I understand now in a personal way what we're asking of our young people to go and fight for our country, to put their lives on the line, to defend our liberties here and protect our interests around the world. When the situation broke 2 years ago with the VA, the reporting of what was happening in Arizona and in other places around the country, I reached out to the Lovell Hospital here. I spoke with Captain Acosta, who was then the acting director of the hospital. And by the way, in our district, we have the first and only joint DoD-VA hospital at James Lovell Hospital. I understood what was going on and wanted to make sure and discovered that we were at the forefront on systems, on efforts to make sure that our veterans were being taken care of. In Congress, we need to make sure that we're investing in new systems and technologies so that this doesn't happen again and our veterans have the care they deserve.
Thank you. Ms. Rotary.
Not much difference in our answers. I too have had the opportunity to meet with the head of the VA and the head of the VA hospital. It is absolutely critical that our administrative departments are held accountable, and most particularly for our men and women who have fought on our behalf to save our freedoms. I was talking to Jerry Adler earlier about his work as a Korean War veteran and making sure that veterans have the supports that they need as they come back or as they've been here for many, many decades. As a mayor, one of the first things I did was create a military liaison position to make sure that not only our veterans but our active military families had the supports that they need. But absolutely, moving forward, the VA needs to be held accountable, needs to know that their member of Congress holds them responsible and is also accessible to the very many veterans who live in the 10th District.
Thank you. Ms. Rodering, you have this next question. The 10th Congressional District is a diverse district with many different people in it. How would you direct your attentions to all of the population?
I love that question. Okay, so in Highland Park, we have diverse people as well, but the best part about running for Congress in this district has been the opportunity to talk with people, faith leaders, business leaders, community leaders, teachers, families across the district. We have an unbelievably diverse district, and there is so much opportunity here for somebody who has a desire to reach out and to be an advocate for the very many interests that exist. We are unfortunate that we have not had someone who's worked on the ground, who's been a mayor, who knows how to work with business leaders and with community leaders to get things done. And now we do have that opportunity, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress in this district, is for the very real opportunity to bring together our many different populations and to recognize also the specific needs of those different populations. Whether we're coming together to deal with issues such as transit or jobs or education, or we're looking at the very specific issues that impact them, whether it's environmental challenges in Waukegan, food deserts in North Chicago, and so on. So to me, this is the greatest reason to run for Congress in this district. There is so much that can be done with the right leadership and the right passion and the right willingness to be an advocate for the very many voices that are here.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
Nancy touched on the diversity of our district. It is an incredibly rich and diverse district with communities like Highland Park, where we have some of the best schools, some of the greatest opportunities, great businesses, but also communities like North Chicago, Waukegan, Round Lake, where we have schools that are really struggling. But each and every one of our communities is a distinct community in and of itself, proud of what they're fighting for, and looking for a hand up, a leg up, a chance just to make their communities a little bit stronger. I have loved my experience over the last 6 years, getting to know these different communities, being a member of BEST, for example, in Round Lake, the Round Lake communities. There's 5 communities that come together. They meet once a month. Community leaders get together over breakfast and talk about things they can do, from issues like transportation to early childhood education. Had a chance to go and literally sit in and watch the preschool in Round Lake and what they're doing. Why is that important? Because only 15% of children in Round Lake have preschool before they get to kindergarten. Knowing those issues and being able to go to Congress to advocate for more resources to move us towards universal preschool is one of the things I do. Friday night I was in North Chicago at the Black History Month program. For the 4th time I've been able to be a part of that program, to talk to these young people and get a sense of their aspirations. To speak on Thursday morning at Maine East High School, understanding their issues, asking the kids what they want to do, and understanding that each one of these children has big dreams, but sees big obstacles, and my role is to take down the obstacles so they can achieve their dreams. I love the diversity of our district, and I think it's one of the things we should all be proud of.
Thank you. So the next question is on income inequality, and what would you do to reduce income inequality in this district and across the nation?
This is what I hope will continue to be one of the broad themes of this presidential and congressional elections this year. The disparity of income in our country, the have-lots and have-nots, and their separation is something that I believe threatens our long-term future. We need to get back to that idea that this is a country of opportunity. I'll talk about those kids at Maine East High School. They have to know that they have, if they work hard, as President Obama says, work hard, play by the rules, get an education, and strike out, that they have every bit of a chance to succeed as our kids here in Highland Park or in Deerfield. When I was in Congress, I was proud to vote for legislation that would raise the minimum wage, because nobody in this country should be working full-time and forced to live in poverty. The first piece of legislation I introduced was the America Works Act, a bill that worked with industry and educational institutions, primarily technical schools and community colleges, to make sure that our young people and people in career changes could get the skills they need to fill the job openings businesses have. There are 600 to 800,000 manufacturing jobs going unfilled in this country every year because we don't have people with those skills. So I introduced legislation to address that problem. I introduced legislation called the LEARN Act that would allow companies to spend education dollars, GI Bill dollars, on the-job training. So our veterans coming home could go find a job and get the training they need to fill that job and have a lifetime career, not necessarily needing to go and rack up student debt. These are the things that I did and will continue to do when I go back to Congress. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a question that bears unpacking, in a sense. There are a number of components to why we have this situation. One of the key ones, obviously, is the minimum wage. And perhaps you know that in our county, 81% of people who receive food stamps have at least one person in their family working full-time. That should tell you that what they're earning isn't enough and needs to be addressed. We need to raise the minimum wage. We also need to make sure that kids have access to good education so that when they leave school, they're able to find jobs, they're able to continue their education, that they have access to community college or vocational training or four-year college, the opportunity to move ahead and to receive the necessary foundation that will give them the opportunities to move forward. And then we need to have those jobs be available. We need to provide the right incentives so that our businesses aren't leaving the district, aren't leaving the country, and we have a broad range of diverse and unique jobs for people of all skill levels. So it really is a number of pieces that need to be addressed. The minimum wage, access to education, and access to jobs.
Thank you. Next question goes to you, Ms. Verdering. What will you do to protect the rights of the LGBT community?
It is incumbent upon us to recognize that discrimination is not who we are. We need to take every step we can to make sure that everybody, no matter who they love, no matter who they want to marry, no matter who they want to live with, has the right to do so without fear of recrimination, without concern about losing their jobs, without having discrimination in terms of finding housing and so forth. I was a loud and outspoken supporter of marriage equality when that came through in Illinois, and I'm so pleased to see that it's now the law of the land. But knowing that there are very real struggles, and I just read an article last week that talked about transgender girls in particular and how high their risk is of being abused, of being victimized. We all need to take a step back and think about those times in our lives when we may have faced intolerance, when we may have faced discrimination, and then move forward and be strong advocates for all of these people, all of our kids' friends, everybody who is facing these types of discriminations. As mayor, I created an all-city, year-round anti-bullying campaign to bring this very topic to bear. And just last week, the city of Highland Park made sure that its laws continue to state that there will be zero discrimination no matter what your gender, what your orientation, and so on if you take a job with the city of Highland Park.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider?
So growing up, I'm one of 18 grandchildren on my mother's, my grandparents. My oldest cousin, Mark, is gay. When Julie and I got married in 1989, Mark was moving from Denver to Seattle to be with his then partner, Buzz. My aunt was upset. My grandmother, who was born in 1907, said to my Aunt Maureen, "Why would you be any less happy for your son being with the person he loves than you are for Brad being with the person he loves?" That was my grandmother's view, and that passed down to me. This has been an issue I have fought for a very, very long time. In 2011, when Julie, our sons Adam and Daniel, and I sat at the table and talked about running for Congress, Adam asked me the question, "But Dad, you have your position on marriage equality. That may make it hard for you to get elected." I said, "My position is my position, and the cards will fall where they may." And then it may have actually been at a League of Women Voters panel like this, but I was asked the question in the campaign in 2012, and I gave the answer I'm giving now. Anyone who loves somebody should be able to marry them, period, plain and simple. And all of a sudden, it was an issue in the campaign. I was one of the few, maybe the only, straight candidate running on a campaign of equality, saying that everyone should be able to marry the person they love. We got news articles around the country. We got a lot of support. Here I am 5 years later, and I'm talking to you from a state that is one of the first states to pass marriage equality, and I'm very proud of that fact. I'm talking to you from a country that now has marriage equality as the law of the land. But there are many people who are going to try to take us back and try to fight us on equality, a whole list of issues. We have to come together as Democrats and make sure that equality continues to be something we work for, we fight for, and never allow anyone to take it away.
Thank you. Ms. Rotering, what would you do to increase the transparency of investment stocks? What regulations would you suggest, et cetera?
Increase the transparency of investment stocks. Is there more to this question?
Investments in stocks. Specifically, they stated with the Department of Labor regulations.
I'm going to have to defer on that question. I don't have an answer.
Okay. Mr. Schneider?
So what the question is about is the Department of Labor is considering issuing a requirement that managers of investments for retirees be fiduciaries. Fiduciary is a higher standard than most stockbrokers currently have, but the concern, and it is a real legitimate concern, is that there are a lot of people out there, the minority of managers, but there's a lot of managers, so it's a significant number, who are taking advantage of people and literally costing them their entire retirement nest egg. We need to have transparency of management, of the managers selling services to retirees who may be retiring with $25,000, $250,000, not huge nest eggs, but it's what separates them, with Social Security, by the way, between poverty and a secure and dignified retirement. I've said over and over, I said in my opening remarks, I hope I didn't run out of time, that everyone deserves a right to a secure and dignified retirement. This is one of the differences between us and the Republicans. Bob Dole has voted time and again for the Ryan budget that would end the Medicare guarantee as we know it. He has voted to privatize Social Security. He talks about raising the retirement age, right? A lot of people might be able to work past age 65, but a lot of people struggle just to get to 65. Backbreaking work, laborers, people who are struggling the most. And in fact, it's estimated that many of those people have a life expectancy, people working for lower wages, life expectancy closer to 70. If you raise the retirement age, they would never get that Social Security. Those are the things I will do to protect seniors.
Thank you. Let's turn to a different section. I'll give you first dibs at it, Ms. Rottering. What is your opinion on the Apple versus the government with the cell phone regulations?
So hasn't this been an interesting conversation? You know, when you look at the law that's being brought into this conversation, a 200-year-old law, we know it's not a new topic, although it feels fresh and scary and new and acute. At the end of the day, what's interesting is at first it was this one phone. Well, then we come to find that it's not just been this one phone, but dozens of requests, tens of thousands of requests. And so while I respect and appreciate the very real need and priority of maintaining the security of our nation, I also respect and appreciate civil liberties and the rights to privacy. And so my concern comes not only from a civil liberties standpoint, but also from a technological standpoint. And the very real concern was discussed this morning again in the New York Times about once you let in an opening to that back door, then hackers and malfeasance will get in, and then we have chaos and we're back at it again. We clearly need to look at the dark web side of things in terms of terrorists and gathering necessary information to protect our security, but we also need to balance that with the civil liberties of privacy and making sure that we're not resulting in unintended consequences of opening up our technology to those who also want to do us harm.
So we have to balance and protect our personal security and our civil liberties. It's something we've been doing as a nation going back to 1789 with the law of all writs, but that was also the same year that our Constitution was ratified. A lot has changed in the 230-some years since the Constitution was ratified, but certain things are immutable. The idea that we do have a right to privacy, that we do have and deserve a protection for unreasonable search and seizure. Now, one area where Nancy and I may disagree is that what the United States government is asking is not a back door, but for a front door to this one phone. But she's right when she says that it's not just about this one phone. So what has to happen, I believe, is we need to have this conversation at a national level. How, as a country, do we want to balance our national security interests and our personal liberty interests? I don't think we have to make a choice between the two. I think as a nation of really smart people, the Republican presidential debate aside, a nation of really smart people, we can figure out how to move forward. And we have to, because encryption technology is not getting simpler, it's getting more complex. The pervasiveness of technology into our lives is not getting less, it's getting more. How many have thermostats that tell when the heat's up or down that you can check from your iPhone? How many have smart cars that are connected now to our iPhone? Or these exercise bands? All the things we do are getting more and more connected. We need to have the discussion on how we deal with the technology and the protection of our liberties.
Thank you. This next question goes to Mr. Schneider. Do you support a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, or should the U.S. force Israel to move some of their communities?
So I am proud to say that I have been a strong advocate and supporter of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship going back at least 45 years from high school. I went to college. I was involved in college. When I went to Israel for the first time, it wasn't just to visit. I went to live after college for a year. I've been to Israel many times. I've led trips to Israel. When I got to the United States House of Representatives, I went on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I became one of the leaders within the House on issues related to the U.S.-Israel relationship because of my experience. People, in fact, they still call me to ask my opinion. Let me make this as clear as possible. The only solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has lasted for many generations now is for a two-state solution. But the only way to that two-state solution is through direct negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Together, they will make the hard decisions on both sides that will hopefully lead to two nations living side by side in prosperity and peace, a secure Jewish nation of Israel with Jerusalem as its capital, and a viable, hopefully prosperous nation of Palestine that can be the home for the Palestinians. I worked on that as a member of Congress. I worked on that for years before I got to Congress. I've continued to work on it since I left Congress, and I hope to have the chance, with your help, to get back to Congress and work on it again.
Thank you.
We all agree that it is absolutely vitally important to have a strong Israel and U.S. partnership. I am deeply committed to maintaining and to supporting that partnership moving forward. That being said, we know that the existential risk to Israel is not coming up with a way to continue to sustain itself, and that the true path to doing that is via a two-state solution. So I too am committed to working and making sure that Israel and Palestine have the necessary supports to negotiate on their own terms the appropriate way to move forward to ensure a strong Jewish democratic state and a strong peaceful Palestinian state.
Thank you. Ms. Rotering, you have this question. A turnout seems to be the key to winning in the 10th for Democrats. What are your plans to address the issues of low voter turnout?
One of the things I love to do, and I've had the chance to do as mayor, is to let students know the vital importance of their voices, the importance of advocacy, the importance of sharing their position and certainly showing up to vote, and that's true for all of us. I've put students on city commissions because I want them to be invested. I want them to know that what they have to say matters, and it helps them to become good leaders moving forward. That being said, absolutely, we have to have strong voter turnout in the 10th, and we have the team, I have the passion, we have the energy, and we have the resources to get people excited that this is finally a chance for this district to gain a courageous leader, somebody who can move forward, who can beat Bob Dole, and who can hold this seat in 2018.
Thank you.
We've seen the problems of low voter turnout across the country in a lot of different ways. We see it and are feeling it right now in the current election of Governor Rauner and the impact that's having on the state. We need to get people to the polls. That means engaging them. Now, there is a piece of it that's talking about issues that matter to the voters. There's a piece of it that says, let's stop having the circuses like we saw last week, and I don't mean to keep bringing up the Republican debate, but it was also very scary because that doesn't inspire young people to get out to the polls and vote. But there are more things we can do, concrete things we can do, that will make it easier to vote. For example, making it automatic when you get your driver's license that you register to vote. Making it a holiday on election day so people don't have to compete. Do they go to work or do they go to vote? And if you're working 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs, you already talked about that, they're going to choose to go to work because their family's livelihood depends on it. Or maybe we move elections to a weekend so fewer people are having to work on that day. There are concrete things we can and should be doing. But there's more to it than that as well. We need accountable government. If people will come and vote in large numbers, we will see more responsive representatives at all levels, local, state, and federal, responding to the needs of our communities, and that will engage more of our people into voting the next time. So I'm committed to making sure that we have access to voting, that everyone has the right to vote, and that we protect that right for all people.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try and summarize this question. It deals with collective bargaining and unionization. So that's been attacked at state levels. What should the federal government do to encourage or not encourage collective bargaining and unionization?
Well, let me start with saying I believe to my core that it is a fundamental right for people to be able to organize, to form a union, and to be able to bargain collectively. And the federal government does have a role making sure that everyone throughout our country has that right. We are seeing efforts in Illinois to take that right away. Governor Rauner has his turnaround agenda. There was a hearing in Lincolnshire a couple months ago. Was anyone there? There were about 500 people in Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire has passed a ordinance that would make it, that would create Lincolnshire right to work. Okay? It only applied to private companies, not public sector workers. And by the way, there's not a single private company in Lincolnshire that has a union. So this was a solution to a problem that didn't evidently exist. I went to speak that night. I stood at the microphone for an hour, was in line, I was supposed to speak second, and the mayor of Lincolnshire refused to allow me to speak. I believe I would have given a really good speech, impassioned about people's right to have the ability to organize, to bargain collectively. Because where we have strong labor, we have stronger communities. Wages are higher. productivity is higher. I believe we need to protect the right to work. I believe the right to organize. I believe that we need to make sure that all people have access to labor, collective bargaining if that's what they want. I believe we have to protect PLAs, wage agreements. These are the things we have to do, and I think the role in Congress that I led on was good. And that's why I have the endorsement of the AFL-CIO.
Thank you. We know that the right to organize, the right to create a union has truly been the foundation of our middle class and a foundation of the backbone of the economy of our country. And so preserving and supporting that right is absolutely critical to growing our economy, to giving people the right to have a voice and to speak out against work conditions that are unfair, difficult, or unsafe. As a mayor, I can tell you we have 4 collective bargaining units in the city of Highland Park. And when I became the mayor, they were all in arbitration. That means they were all in disagreement with their management. I'm happy to tell you that since becoming mayor, we've moved to a much better place. I've taken the time to sit down with my rank and file and to hear what's on their mind and to use those important inputs into creating the priorities for running a well-run city. So it's absolutely important to protect the right to organize. I'm also a member of the legislative committee of a council of governments called the Northwest Municipal Conference, and we were given Governor Rauner's turnaround agenda, and it included his provision concerning right to work. I chose not to bring that to my city council because I felt that it was a disrespect and an unfair thing to ask of my council, given the wonderful relationships that we had with the people that we were working with. So I absolutely support and will continue to support workers' rights to organize and to have a voice, a fair voice, and an even playing field in working with management.
Thank you. We have chance for one more question if we cut it back to a minute. So in your opinion, is it more important to vote for legislation in agreement with the opinion of the people in your district or with your own personal opinion?
That's a great question. So we're running to be members of the Congress, the House of Representatives. This is a representative government, and I've had wonderful opportunities as mayor of Highland Park and as a member of the city council to have important conversations. And oftentimes when we start those conversations, we have assumptions of where we each stand. And we're seeing this now actually with the District 112 referendum question. But that being said, with respect and with understanding and with taking the time to analyze the very real and complex issues that we're talking about, you then can come to a good answer, a representative answer. You don't want to be a shill, but you also want to be true to your conscience and to your moral compass. And at the end of the day, the beauty of our democratic process, messy as it may be, is that we get to a good answer, we get to a good position, you have a representative government.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
When I first got to Washington in 2012 as a congressman-elect, Republicans, Democrats all went through the same orientation. Nancy Pelosi spoke to the group, the combined group, and she made a very, I thought, important statement. Your job title and your job responsibility are the same, representative. We are running to represent all of the people of the 10th District of Illinois, all 700,000. It is our responsibility to understand the issues before us at a level and depth probably more than most people throughout the district have the time or the interest to understand. Some will come to us and they'll advocate their positions. It's important to listen to everyone from all sides. But as a member of Congress, you also have access to classified information sometimes, classified briefings. You have access to experts, issue experts. You have to go in and you have to appreciate from where they are coming. And then, as a representative, you have to make the decision that is best for the people, I believe, for the people we represent. That may or may not agree with my own personal position, but it is what I believe is the best for the people of the district.
Thank you. And now we're going to go to closing statements, and they will be 1.5 minutes long, and we'll begin with Ms. Rotary.
Thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you today and to hear the great questions that are on your mind. We've watched this seat go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it's time now for a courageous leader, someone who has the passion, the will, and the ability to move forward, to run for, win this seat in 2016 and hold this seat in 2018. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Chicago Tribune. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Chicago Sun-Times. I'm also proud to have the endorsement of Senator Dick Durbin and Ab Mikva and Adlai Stevenson and numerous mayors and state reps and state senators and former state senators, business leaders, faith leaders, community leaders. We need to make this happen. We need to move forward with courageous leadership and take this seat back. I offer you someone who brings experience in business, in law, and 7 years of elected office. It's been my honor and my privilege to serve on behalf of the community of Highland Park, to work through the very real issues and represent the values that are so important to each and every one of us. And so I thank you for your time today. I look forward to continuing this conversation, and I ask for your support. Early voting is starting tomorrow, and Election Day is March 15th. I'm Nancy Rodering. I'm running for United States Congress. I hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out on a really beautiful Sunday. There's lots of places you could be. You chose to come here to listen to us and to measure the issues. Nancy, thank you for the constructive engagement. Thank you for hosting and moderating. I do want to represent this district. I want to go back and continue the work that we started for our communities, building our economy, improving education, protecting health care, trying to address this issue of gun violence in our communities, and making sure that our future, the American promise that our parents sacrificed to give us a better future, we keep that promise and make the hard choices so our children have a better future and their children after them. Serving this district was the greatest honor and the highest responsibility I have ever had in my life. I know in my gut that this district was better served by the team we put in place. A day doesn't go by that I don't go somewhere where someone stops me and thanks me for the work that my team did, helping them, whether it was getting a passport or dealing with Social Security or the VA. And I also know that this district was better represented when I was taking votes in the House than with Mr. Dole there today. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the mayors in our community, of North Chicago, of Waukegan, of Wheeling, of Niles, 8 mayors, 7 state senators, Senator Link, Senator Biss, Senator Mulrow, several others. Cook County President Toni Preckwinkle has endorsed me because she knows the work I did helping her in her agenda trying to make Cook County better. And Secretary of State Jesse White has given me my endorsement. I'm asking for your help today to make sure that we can take back this seat in November. I ask for your vote tomorrow through March 15th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out. I know that I needn't encourage you to vote. If you came out on this nice Sunday, you are going to vote. Early voting begins tomorrow, which is leap year, and it continues until you can vote in person on March 15th. Thank you to all the local leagues who put this together, and thank you to the candidates. Now it's time. And if you were not at the first forum, let me just welcome you and say that the mission of the League of Women Voters is that it's not a partisan political organization. It encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in its government. When we say it's nonpartisan but political, it means that we do not endorse or oppose candidates for public office, but we do take positions on issues and advocate for those positions. The candidates have agreed to some rules for this debate, and they drew numbers for giving their opening statements. Mr. Stanton will go first. All statements will be 1.5 minutes, and answers to questions are 1.5 minutes. There are ushers around. If you'd like to submit a question, please do so. League members will review the questions just for duplication and appropriateness. So these gentlemen do not have anything to do with garbage collection. So keep it on a state's attorney's race. No visual aids by the candidates. And in order to encourage the nonpartisan, if you have any badges on or t-shirts, please take them off, supporting the candidates. So with that, we will begin, and Mr. Stanton, you'll have the first statement.
Thank you. I'm Matt Stanton. I'm a practicing attorney and an adjunct law professor. I've been an attorney for a little over a decade. 16 years ago, I decided to go to law school. I went to law school in the evenings. The reason that I picked that time in my life is that I have a family of 5 children, and for many years I've been a single parent of those children who are now grown. 2 of those children have special needs. It was a very demanding, challenging life, but when the kids were old enough for me to be gone to night school, I'd come home with my books. They'd get to know a little something about torts and contracts, and I'd get to brush up on algebra, which was something that just didn't stick the first time around, but they were very good at, especially my daughters, 4 of them. I am running to change the culture at the state's attorney's office. This is a culture of conviction at all costs. What are those costs? The costs are tens of millions of dollars in wrongful conviction lawsuits that county taxpayers have paid. The cost is a less safe, less secure society when there's perpetrators that have been able to go free because of it. And it's also resulted in the destroyed lives of those people that have been incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. I will make sure wrongful convictions end, and I will also make sure that anyone's convicted of a crime, anyone's guilty, will serve justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you to the League for sponsoring this event. My name is Mike Perillo. I am also a candidate for the Democratic nomination to run for the office of Lake County State's Attorney. In that regard, I am very pleased and proud to be able to tell you that I've been endorsed by the Daily Herald newspaper in this particular primary race, and I'm also endorsed by the Lake County Democratic Party, in addition to receiving a personal endorsement from Coroner Tom Rudd here in Lake County. By way of background, this coming summer I will, I guess, celebrate my 33rd year as a practicing attorney. I started out as a Navy JAG lawyer here at Great Lakes. That's how I came to Lake County 32 years ago. And in that capacity, I was a prosecuting attorney at court-martial, and later I was an administrative type attorney for what was then known as the school's command. We had anywhere from 8 to perhaps 15 or more thousand people at the command. I was the lawyer for the commanding officer. Beyond that, I've served as a felony assistant in the Lake County Public Defender's Office and as a felony assistant in the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. I've been in private practice 22 years. I'm running because I seek the privilege of public service. I want to serve you. I want to get into Lake County State's Attorney's Office, and I want to make that office, and I will make that office, the best State's Attorney's Office in the state of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question goes to you, Mr. Perillo, and we've talked, but both have talked a little bit about it. But what is your vision for the position of State's Attorney, and what would you do to go about improving the office?
First and foremost, what I would do would be to immediately institute what I would call the Conviction Integrity Unit. This unit would be full-time. It would review past cases. It would review cases where issues have been raised as to convictions. It would monitor new cases coming into the office for professionalism and quality control. And thirdly, the unit would coordinate training within the office and hopefully outside the office for investigators and similarly situated persons. I will be in the office full time. If you are looking for me, you will find me in the office. I intend to lead by example. And again, to repeat myself, I'm going to give this county the best state's attorney's office in this state.
Thank you.
One look at the state's attorney's office in Lake County, and you can see that it's been running in fear and confusion for a long time. We have this string of wrongful convictions that is still, where there's still continuing cases coming down the pipeline. When Mike Nierheim took over the state's attorney's office, he took it over as a reformer. According to the Better Government Association, he interviewed all 144 employees and he replaced none. I think we can't talk about improvement and reform without being able to address some of the people that have been in the state's attorneys for a long time and who may be affiliated with some of these wrongful conviction lawsuits. A confession the interrogation techniques and the confessions that have been part. One thing I want to point out, I don't know if everyone knows this, but each one of these wrongful convictions involved actual innocence, meaning that it wasn't some quirky thing of court that they were released. The other one was all of them involved confessions, coerced confessions. So I think we have to examine the employees, restructure that office. I have a deferred prosecution program in my literature that I'd like to put forward.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Stanton. And there's been a lot of this in the news, of course, but what will you do to ensure the fair and legal treatment by the police and judicial system for people of color in Lake County?
I think diversity is a huge factor, and diversity in society, and especially in an office, a governmental office like the state's attorney. We have to have more inclusive society. We have to enlarge the we and minimize the us versus them. An important part of that is to see more minorities in the office, more people that reflects the diversity of our society placed in the office. Women, people of color, people from different backgrounds. I think that's going to go a long way to fixing that problem. Now, the problem itself often, I believe, involves unconscious, subconscious bias, confirmation bias, that, especially with police enforcement, that comes in fast developing, low information situations where people have to make quick snap judgments. Certainly training makes a difference, but so I would have training programs, I would have specific sensitivity training, those sorts of things. But I think the people that we're working with has to be part of this problem, or solution as well, and that is a more diverse group in the office, and I pledge to make that a reality.
Thank you. Mr. Perillo.
Well, I certainly agree that we need diversity. And one of the ways to do that is the obvious, is to bring people into the office who reflect our community at large. As a broad generalization, my own understanding is that typically when people are hired in the office, and probably in many offices, the hiring committee will look to the resumes which have come into the office. And I think that's fine, but I think we need to be proactive. I think we need to go out. We need to find people to bring into the office to make the office reflect the community at large. I think that would go a long way in delivering justice to the people of Lake County. The other thing that I would bring to the office is my subjective belief that every case is an individual case, and you look objectively at the evidence. You go where the evidence takes you. You don't go where you want the evidence to go. You go where the evidence takes you. Lastly, I think, again, you set a tone. I learned in my life, and particularly when I was in the service, that any organization is going to take on the attributes of the leader. And I certainly will be bringing diversity and objectivity to the office, and I think that'll go a long way.
Thank you. Mr. Perillo, the next question goes to you. How would you address the problem of opiates and heroin use in Lake County?
There is, as I understand it now, we have a number of specialty courts, one of which is a drug court. We have a veterans court, we have a mental health court, we have a deferred prosecution program, and quite obviously I support all of those programs. In terms of addressing the opiates problem, quite frankly, I would want to meet with community leaders and with legislatures to see what I could do as state's attorney to help eradicate that problem. One of the things we can do in the state's attorney's office is to look at user amount of crimes. In other words, a crime involving a user amount of controlled substances, and get that person the help he or she needs. There's a movement now in the country, I think a bipartisan movement, and that's a good thing, to reduce the prison population. And I think much of the prison population is there because of drug addiction and other factors. I think if we can eliminate somebody getting into that prison pipeline at the start with that first case, with a user amount. If we could eliminate that, if we can, by eliminate I mean if we can use an alternative so that this person isn't stigmatized for the rest of his life and that this person gets treatment, it's going to go a long way to down the road obviating the problem of overpopulation in the prisons and of creating people who frankly could be doomed to fail.
The most recent statistics I saw, now these are federal statistics, not Lake County, but that 47 to 48% nonviolent offenders in federal prisons are there because of drugs. I think in Lake County we have something that's relatively new, an opioid initiative that I'm still studying parts of it. It's been introduced by the current state's attorney. There is a drug court in Lake County that's operating now. I would see to improve those, that I think these are the right kinds of programs. I'm not satisfied that they're being run efficiently and effectively. There is, drug addiction often comes hand in hand with mental illness. We all know that joblessness, economic hardship increases the amount of drug addiction. And if we could do something, there may be something that the state's attorney's office could do in the way of public-private partnerships to link the drug court with employment. That would be ideal. But I think we need to see this as a social problem and not primarily as a crime in and of itself.
Thank you. Mr. Stanton, we're going to stay in kind of the same area. What impact will the medical marijuana dispensaries in Lake County, do you think, what impact will they have on crime problems, specifically DUI and resale?
I don't think they're going to have a major impact, or maybe perhaps an impact at all. Medical marijuana is pretty closely circumscribed by law, and law-abiding people with bona fide conditions are going to be participating in medical marijuana. I think the reasons for marijuana use are not going to be any different if we've got a medical facility that's prescribing marijuana. I think those things have been considered by the different state legislatures when they've carved out allowances for medical marijuana. My understanding in a survey of the states that have such laws, that Illinois is pretty restrictive the way that it is. So I don't see it. In short, I don't see it as a public safety issue.
Thank you. Mr. Perrello?
At this point, I don't see it as an issue either. If it becomes an issue, obviously it'll be brought to the attention of the state's attorney and the appropriate action will be taken. But as I look at the issue right now, I do not anticipate that there would be a public service impact on our community at large from medical marijuana.
Thank you. Mr. Perrello, this next question goes to you. Where is it? How would you handle first-time nonviolent offenders?
I think this goes back to what we discussed a few minutes ago. First-time nonviolent offenders, we need to take a hard look at those cases. Every case is different. Every case is an individual case. But again, I just don't see the point of creating, especially with young people, 17, 18, 19-year-old people, creating a criminal record in a nonviolent offense which is going to stick with this person for the rest of his or her life. We have specialty courts, we've discussed that. We have court supervision available in Illinois, which when the person completes his or her sentence, there is no conviction of record. There are other tools currently available in the law to prosecutors to give the nonviolent offender a shot at straightening himself out, at giving him the programs he needs, whether it be drug or mental health counseling or whatever it might be. And if and when the person successfully completes that program, there are ways in which the person can be discharged from the criminal justice system without conviction. And if we could rehabilitate people at that young age, my belief and my hope is we will not see them back in the system later. And if we don't see them back in the system later, we certainly won't see them in jail.
The question of first-time nonviolent offenders, I need to put a finer point on it, and if you'll allow me, and that's felony. One of the things Mr. Perillo's talking about is especially a concern for a young person or any person to have a felony on their record. You can have, it can make it impossible for you to get a job, difficult to rent an apartment, and almost impossible to really completely pay your debt to society and move on if you're wearing the scarlet letter of the felony. There is a deferred prosecution program that I favor implementing that was Illinois legislature passed in 2013 that enumerates certain felonies. Well, first I should say it allows this to be adopted on a county level. You have to have, the judiciary's got to go along with it. The program involves the consent of the victim. So it has to be more of a restorative type of criminal justice scenario. And those felonies are enumerated in the law. Violent crimes, sex crimes are not included in it. And just as a footnote, just last week I learned that State's Attorney's Office has floated something they're calling a deferred prosecution, which just shows that they're paying attention to us up here.
Thank you. Mr. Stanton, how would you make bail fair for indigent citizens charged with a serious crime?
This is another area where offenders who are poor and economically challenged are sometimes pushed deeper into the criminal justice system. If somebody's got a bail that they can't meet, and it means that they're going to lose their job, or it's going to cause a disruption with their home or their marriage, or upset their family in a host of ways, and I've seen many cases like this, there just has to be a way to have something that considers the source of the income that's being used for bail. Bail is to keep the person around so that they come back to court to face their charges. So, you know, the shorthand version of that is the higher the bail, the more likely they're going to stick around and they're not going to run. So I think that we need to have judges, and maybe there's something we could do as state's attorneys, certainly in recommending bail, that brings in a multiplicity of factors, including their home life, their relative stability in the neighborhood, whether they're working and in school, and that should affect the total amount.
Thank you.
In terms of fairness of bail, yes, it's true that there are people in the system who, because of economic restrictions, cannot post bail. But we do have a pretrial bond services program here in Lake County, and certain persons can be admitted to bond or to bail with restrictions. For example, 24-hour home confinement or a curfew, say from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That system has been in place for as long as I've been in Lake County, in the system in Lake County since 1988. Quite obviously, I support it, and I think in certain cases that would be the way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Perillo, there is an independent case review panel to review cases for wrongful convictions. Would you continue this panel, or would you have another solution?
I've already touched upon that. As I understand it, the panel which exists now is voluntary in nature. I want to make it clear, I have no criticism of the individual persons who currently sit on this panel, but I do criticize the voluntary nature of the panel. When you pay out more than $27 million in wrongful conviction judgments, you need to have a full-time, I'll use the term 24/7. Now, of course, nobody's going to work around the clock, but you need to have a full-time unit in the office to review past cases and to look at current cases for quality control. And again, as I said perhaps 10 minutes ago, to conduct training from the lessons you learn from reviewing all of these cases. I would bring in an attorney from outside the office, someone who has not been in the office, to run and coordinate that unit as I've described it to you. I think a full-time unit is the way to go. I do not think costs to you, which exceed $27 million, are solved by a voluntary proposal.
Thank you.
I agree that having a panel, having a committee, and how that's constituted, I think should change, but we do have one now. I would agree that it should not be a volunteer panel. I think it should be more of a committed, professional. My understanding is maybe staffed a little more completely than it currently is. The other thing is that I would certainly use the panel if I had it in place. And if I had a case situation where a conviction, and for those of you who aren't deeply involved in the criminal law, if you have a conviction from somebody, that kind of trumps everything. And you, as a prosecutor, you can go into court and pretty easily get that conviction based on the confession, if you have the confession in your hand. Now, as a state's attorney, if I have a case where there's a confession and there's no physical evidence to corroborate it, that would certainly be an example of a case that I would send to the committee. Because you have to seek after, our job isn't to get convictions, it's to seek after the truth of the matter, protect society, and pursue justice.
Thank you. It's been determined that we're going to shorten this forum to about a half an hour, and so this will be the last question. There is a belief on the part of many people that government is the enemy. How would you convince them, or what changes would you make to convince them that this is not the case? And that goes to Mr. Stanton.
The scope of the question's quite broad. I'd say we could start by something as everyday and down to earth as a program in the schools that the state's attorney could sponsor. Kind of like when I was a kid, there was an officer-friendly program, and because you can look at the zip codes where crime comes from, where people are born, and you can correlate that with incarceration rates later in life. I don't think it'd be too difficult to have the state's attorney have something that is an outreach program in the schools that can begin teaching people about what their rights and responsibilities are. I myself was a substitute teacher during my first year of law school, and if you know substitute teacher, you just have to keep matters from spinning out of control. I used to bring in my contracts and my torts books, and I would read to the 4th and 5th graders, and they understood what it meant to have a duty and a responsibility to come up with a reason or a solution when a promise was broken, as in contracts. I'm not suggesting giving law lectures to grade school students directly, but to instill belief in government. And my last point, I'm running out of time, is that we have a transparent government, that it doesn't appear to be hiding anything from the population.
Well, I'll put it this way. If I am fortunate enough to gain the position, I will be obviously in the government, and I do not believe that the government is our enemy or your enemy. In terms of what we will do, we need to, I agree, we need to liaison with the community, but we need to show that every case that comes into that office is treated objectively and is treated with fairness. In terms of getting out into the community, I'm reminded of something I did my senior year of law school. I was involved in what was known as a street law clinic, and 3 days a week in my senior year of law school, I taught a law class in an inner city high school. It was an amazing experience. At the end of the semester, we brought the kids to the law school. They did a moot court, and not because it was me, but just because it was that time in the news cycle, the New York Times covered that, and it was great. This is the kind of thing we need to do. We need to get out there. We can't be reticent about liaisoning, about dealing with the community and letting the community know who we are. But again, to repeat myself, we need to be objective. Every case needs to be dealt with based on the facts and on the evidence. And I think once we establish that track record, it's going to go a long way to showing everybody that prosecutions are fair and equitable.
Thank you. And closing statements, Mr. Stanton, you will go first.
Does anybody know what a bonsai gardener is? It's the miniature trees where you shape them slowly over time to take, and they're beautiful and they're meditative. I'm running to uproot a culture in the state's attorney's office that has been responsible for, that I think, as I said earlier, has been running in a confused state, in a defensive state. I think my sole reason for running is to make some of these changes that the reformer in there now has refused to make. There's going to be some shaking up, but we need to restore public trust in this office. We need to stop these wrongful conviction lawsuits and the practices underneath them that have led to this. I think the Lake Countyans would know more about this. Most people have an idea about it, but they would know more about it like if there was a John Burge type character like we've seen in Chicago. I don't know if there is, but there is a common thread here, and all roads lead to the state's attorney's office. We need to have a reform, and we need to have it this time around. Whether you vote for myself or Mr. Perillo, at the end of the day, we're on the same team.
Thank you. As I said at the outset, I seek the privilege of service, and I ask you for your trust and your vote. What I bring to the position is 32 plus years of experience as a prosecutor, as a public defender, as a naval officer, as a person who's been in private practice in Waukegan, directly across the street from the Lake County Courthouse for 22 years. The only debt I owe, if elected, is to you. That's all. Particularly at my age, that's the only debt I owe. I look forward to seeing you out there. I ask for your vote. I remind you that I've had the endorsement of the Democratic Party here in Lake County, of the Daily Herald, and of our coroner. I ask you to consider that when you go into the booth and vote. Early voting starts tomorrow. Election day is March 15th. I thank all of you for sticking around to listen to us today, and I thank the League for sponsoring this event.
Thank you very much.